MSNBC's Joanne Reid had a hot mic slip-up while delivering a report on the situation at the southern border yesterday. Let's watch.
Over the weekend, President Biden said he's ready to take action if Congress is serious about solving the border issue.
If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly. And Congress needs to get it done.
Starting another war.
Now, Reid addressed the moment later in the show and apologized.
Before we go, I just want to apologize very quickly. I was chatting during a clip that was playing, and we try to keep this show very PG-13, so I just want to apologize to anyone who was listening to my behind-the-scenes chatter. Deeply, deeply apologize for that, because it's PG-13 up around here. So thank you to you all for watching the Reid Out.
No worries, Joy. I know that happens sometimes. While some are hopeful a border deal could make its way to President Biden's desk soon, former President Donald Trump seems hell-bent on making sure that never happens. On his website, Truth Social, Trump posted, quote, "A border bill is not necessary to stop the millions of people pouring into our country. They are using this horrific Senate bill as a way of being able to put the border disaster onto the shoulders of the Republicans. The Democrats broke the border. They should fix it. No legislation is needed. It's already there." Trump appears to have allies in the Republican-controlled House, where Speaker Mike Johnson posted, quote, "Any border shutdown authority that allows even one illegal crossing is a non-starter. Thousands each day is outrageous. The number must be zero."
Trump's aggressive stance against a border deal comes as Biden seems to recognize the severity of the crisis in the South. At a campaign stop in South Carolina, Biden said if the proposed legislation became law, he would shut down the border if necessary.
It'll also give me, as president, the emergency authority to shut down the border until it could get back under control. If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly.
When pressed on what shutting down the border actually meant, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre seemed unable to define it. Here she is at a presser yesterday.
There are different definitions, right, of what that looks like, of what actually shutting down the border looks like, right?
All right, that may be true, but the legislation is what's being debated right now. And what seems clear, even Republicans seem to be acknowledging, is that there is a lot of what they asked for in this, what is it, an $8 billion package. But what they're also telegraphing really loudly, not just in Donald Trump's Truth, but other Republican members of Congress, they're saying, this is Kevin Cramer, a Republican from North Dakota, quote, "A border deal that actually reduced the flow of illegal immigration, that would be good for President Biden politically." And that seems to be the rub. There's this acknowledgement that to actually solve the crisis, which they have been focusing on, rightly or wrongly focusing on, and making one of the political priorities of Americans, to actually do something about it at this juncture would apparently in their minds give too much credit to Biden, or I think more accurately would strip them of an ability to hit Biden, attack Biden with that particular talking point. It's ironic because I think, frankly, Biden, by conceding this bill to Republicans, will lose some support from his own base. And it's not clear to me that this is a bargain that's worth fighting, except for that he's obviously very invested in getting Ukraine funding, which is tethered to it, across the finish line. But that's the dynamic here. There are billions of dollars of funds to support local governments and their efforts to address the border crisis. And Republicans are saying, no, I don't want it. Because why exactly? Because as the guest argued yesterday, and as Trump argued in that Truth Social message, well, they're saying Biden already has the authority to do whatever he wants to do. So they're basically saying, we want you to use executive authority and executive fiat to do X, Y, and Z, which, maybe Biden eventually will do. But then what will be the response to that? You went around government. You are the authoritarian. You use executive fiat. They already attack Democrats regularly for using executive actions at all times. So it is becoming a very confusing game of hot potato here.
So I agree in part and I disagree in part. Sure. I think that, look, I'm not naive and no one should be naive. Of course, Republicans don't want to help pass a bill right now, which they don't want to give Joe Biden any kind of win. They want to keep his momentum as a president is stalling, and I think political considerations are absolutely a part of this. Now, the guest we had on yesterday talked about, maybe people should go watch that interview, talked about things he thought the President Biden did have the authority to do right now, absent legislation that could help. Now, however, one reason that illegal border crossings are way up, and they are, I looked at the numbers, they are way up over the course of the last few years, has a lot to do, or something at least to do, with the expiring of that Title 42, the pandemic era policy.
Biden tried to keep that in effect.
Let me finish. Yes.
Sure.
So, but that is an example of legislation. So, if you want to keep that going, you could pass a law. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense because it was designed to keep COVID out of the country,
right?
Which is totally arbitrary.
It's not something that you want to do.
But that is an example of an authority like that. I don't think President Biden. I don't think any president should have the authority to expel people for that reason because it's a BS reason. All that said, look, the bill proposed has caps at 5,000. We're debating what the actual caps are, but I mean, Republicans, the Republican base, the conservative base, has been furious about illegal immigration for 20 years. That they were mad about back in the aughts when it was kind of overlooked as an issue by Republican elites at the time. Zero is what the Republican base wants. So a bill that codifies or enshrines a threshold of illegal crossings that then it's okay to do something about it. I think many Republican vote, not just their representatives fighting this for political reason, but the actual voters will be furious. And the way this is being received by conservatives, I'm reading on social media, is that Langford has committed one of the greatest betrayals of the Republican Party in recent memory. I saw all sorts of people talking about, like, why did Trump endorse this guy? Who were his opponents last time? Can we get him a new primary opponent? There is fury at him and at this bill. So. Again, I'm not, that's just the reality on the right. For my part, I don't.
Republicans are giving the game away by saying we're not going to endorse any border legislation unless the crossings are zero. There hasn't been a time since before human beings crossed the Arctic land bridge into North America. The border crossings between what is now Mexico and what's America has ever been zero.
There wasn't a federal government then to stop that. There is now. They're saying in the policy
at no day
zero.
During the Trump administration was the immigrant crossings ever zero. At no day during any presidential legislation administration in the history of America, border crossings ever been zero.
And on no days are there zero murders, but it's still. The goal,
but that's not the point, Robbie.
The policy is zero murders.
This is like saying, I will pay you what you're owed on the day that you don't breathe. It's letting myself off the hook from ever having to pay you sums that you are owed. The Republicans are intentionally setting a bar that cannot be met. At no point are border crossings zero.
Well, right, but the bill sets a bar that they're not willing to accept.
Okay, fine.
They want to set the bar at zero. And again, this is not coming from me. This is what they're saying.
Robbie.
Set the bar at zero.
That's not true.
And enforce it to get it to zero.
That's not true. They could say the new number is X. And that could be a potential reasonable number. They could look at, let's say, hypothetically, the average daily border crossings under Donald Trump, average it out over the course of the 4 years of his term, and say this is the number that at which all of the provisions in Biden's bill.
I mean, the border apprehensions are now.
But I'm not disputing that, Robbie. The question is whether or not Republicans are obstructing legislation that could bring border crossings down, that already is very, frankly, draconian policy with setting a low number of 5,000, that if it's violated, kicks down to being like 3,500 for weeks until it gets until it's low below 5,000 for weeks and weeks and weeks, which is about on par for what the average border crossings were when Donald Trump was in office. But instead of saying that that's a number, or 2,000 is the number, or any other number that could be at all tethered to reality, they're saying if a single person, unless you can find a policy that magically prevents a single person from ever crossing the American border, we're not going to pass it. And that is plainly a political choice.
I mean, the policy, from my standpoint, just seems pretty arbitrary. Well, why 5,000? Why not 4,000? Why not 6,000? Why not? Well, yeah, and it's so I don't want to support it then. I mean. If it's a families, they're going to be dealt differently than if it's a single individual, and it depends their country of origin. We can send people back to Mexico, but we can't send them back.
That's not arbitrary at all. It's you treat families differently because of the public bipartisan outroar about the idea of families being separated. People think that's horrifying. People with families understand that that's horrifying. Trump got a lot of blowback for it, and nobody wants to go into that space again, Republican or Democrat. It's not arbitrary. It's humanitarian.
All right. Well, I think Republican primary voters feel differently, but that's where the crux of the opposition to this policy.
Well,
is coming
people
from.
who live in Texas and people who live in parts of the country that are actually
they want the border crossings brought down to zero.
Yeah, they're not going to get it. Because
Well, they're not going to get it if they co-sign this policy because it doesn't do anything until it gets to 5,000.
That is not true. First of all, border crossings are already over 5,000, so the policy would immediately go into effect. So what are you talking about? What the Republicans are saying is we're not doing anything. There's a horrible crisis on the border, but we're not going to do anything about it for 10 months. Because as much as we're hand-wringing about how this is a threat to national security, and now ISIS is going to come over the border and all of the wild things that are being said, and the legitimate concerns that people have about safety and the burden on the social safety net and those kinds of things, we're going to do nothing about it for 10 months because it's more important for us to get a few more jobs in at Biden, who's going to lose anyway in all likelihood, polls suggest, than to actually address the crisis that I'm purporting to think is so important. That's the stance of the Republican Party right now. There's a Republican Party in no uncertain terms that is thwarting any effort to address the crisis that they say is a public priority.
I think that's part of it, but also there is sincere opposition to this bill in particular
Robbie,
for the reasons
do you not see how if I say that I won't support any bill that doesn't achieve something that's unachievable, that's constructively saying there's no bill that I'm going to support.
I don't think they think it's unachievable.
Zero border crossings?
Well, it could say, I mean, the plan could say that there's a shutdown of the border until we achieve zero border crossings, which is what that's what Republican voters want. So they just want some Republican political leader to actually propose that and give that to them, which is why they picked Trump in the first place.
What does it mean to shut down the border?
To have more border security, to have the barriers that the Supreme Court is ordering taken down so the Biden administration can get rid of them.
You know that the Supreme Court, because you sat here right now and agreed with me, you know that the Supreme Court did not order them to take any barriers down. What the
allowing them to take them down.
Was that federal border enforcement workers can do what they need to do to enforce the border without interference from state actors.
They're taking down the barriers.
They're taking down some razor wire that was put up. That
so
federal
they can
law
deport more people?
So that because the federal law enforcement border security agents were saying that it was impeding their ability to patrol and protect the border. That is the rationale. So you don't have to I remember a day when federal border agents were the heroes that people wanted to fund more. Now Republicans are saying don't fund them, don't help them, obstruct them, and that apparently is going to help the border crisis.
I'm not even giving you what my perspective is. I'm giving you what my understanding of the conservative perspective is. So you can take that or leave that. More Rising after this.